Hi everyone, and welcome to our knife review channel, Practical Knife Reviews. We're the Huckamakis. I'm Henry. I'm an immunobiologist who works on Ebola research in Germany.
I'm Lara, and I recently graduated college with a bachelor's in economics and management while dual minoring in psychological sciences and cell and molecular biology.
Such an overachiever. What we're going to do on this knife channel, and what the aim of the knife channel is to give you reviews that cut through the fluff that you see on a lot of other knife review channels where they're talking about intricacies of design and different aspects of the production details and the designers. What we really want to focus on is the practicality of different knives, both vintage and current production knives, because at the end of the day, a knife is a tool. And while it's nice to collect knives, which I myself have quite a collection of knives at this point, I'm an amateur knife maker myself, at the end of the day, if a knife doesn't work, it's not worth having. And so what we want to do is focus on the things that make the knife worth having. What's the good, what's the bad, what's the ugly of the knife? And we're going to start on this channel, our maiden video, with a video that's actually not going to focus on how well a knife works, but just a knife that has quite a bit of sentimental value. This knife, is an Imperial Barlow. Imperial was a company that ran out of Providence, Rhode Island. You can tell how old Imperial knives are based on the tang stamp. For those of you who don't know, the tang stamp is what's written on the blade right here. And depending on how the tang stamp appears, you can tell how old the knife is. This specific knife was produced between 1956 and 1988. The reason that this knife in particular has sentimental value to me is because it was given to me by my grandfather, who is something of a hero to me. So a Barlow knife is a traditional jackknife. A jackknife is a knife that has one or more blades that open out of the same pivot, so they all come out of the same end of the knife, and has an oversized bolster, which is this metal part here. This particular Barlow has a clip point blade and has a smaller pen blade. We'll talk more about these individual blade types in future videos, but right now we're just going to focus on this specific knife. So this knife is what you would call a slip joint. A slip joint knife is a non-locking knife that uses springs in the back to hold the blades closed under tension and then open under tension, but there's no lock. So first we'll give you a weight of this knife. We'll bring this scale in, turn it on, and we can see that it weighs 59 grams or 2.1 ounces. It's quite a light knife. The scales are a synthetic material, likely Delrin, and the blades are carbon steel. We'll use Imperial units. Closed, the knife is approximately 3¼ inches long. Open, it is approximately 5¾ inches long, with a cutting length of 2¼ inches and an overall blade length of the clip point blade of 2.5. And the pen blade has a cutting length of approximately 1.5 inches and just under 1¾ inches overall length. Lara, would you like to talk about what you like aesthetically on this knife and what you don't like aesthetically on this knife?
Sure. So, although Henry knows quite a bit about the mechanics of knives, I know, quite honestly, nothing.
You have used knives, you just don't know how they work particularly.
Exactly. So, being that I enjoy all the beauty in life, I like makeup and fashion and things of that sort, I like to look at how things look aesthetically. So, for me, I like the, what is this called, Henry?
These are the scales. So what you have here, I guess we'll do a quick rundown. We have blades, bolster, scales, pins. The liners are the metal pieces here just inside the scales and also in the center. And these large pieces of metal in the back here are called the back springs. So what you're pointing to here are the scales.
So I like the color of the scales, though it does look very
Plasticky.
plastic and childish. If you wouldn't have metal here, I would assume that this would be a child's toy.
Do you want me to tell you why that is?
Sure.
So the reason that the scales look the way they do, let's move it a little bit this way. The reason that the scales look like they do is they're trying to imitate either staghorn or bone, but with a very cheap material. So like I said, this is a synthetic material, likely Delrin, but it's cut in a way that's trying to resemble something a bit nicer. Imperial, the company, which went out of business a few years ago, and the name has since been bought up by Taylor Brands. Imperial, the company, when it was operating out of Rhode Island, was offering budget knives. So good quality blades, nice carbon steel, they would take a very, very keen edge. But these were knives that were intended for people that either didn't have a lot of money or for younger people. And one of the ways that you would cut costs is to use cheaper materials on the scales.
Right. Another thing that I noticed is me having longer nails. It is quite difficult for me to open the mechanism that Henry was talking about earlier.
The slip joint. You would find a way to bring up your nails.
Yeah. Other than that, honestly, I like that it looks semi-old based on the metal here, but the fact that it's difficult for me to open and that this is plastic, it just seems cheap to me, even if it is not.
So there's your aesthetic rundown. Now I'm just going to run through quickly some of the nice things and the flaws, I guess you could say, within this particular knife. So if you look at our back springs here, we actually have very little gapping, which I don't want to say is surprising because Imperial did have good knives, but as I said, they were more of a budget-oriented company. So to have very, very tight transitions in the back springs is a little bit surprising in a good way. We also have a fairly decent fit between the scales and the bolster. And the pins, they are proud. They do extend just above the scales, but not that bad. They're not uncomfortable in any way, and they're quite rounded. The bad, well, as Lara said, the scales, they're a very cheap material, and with just being held down with 2 pins, I'm not even sure if they're glued down. You can see that the ends are starting to pull up. I can actually, let's see if I can get that. There you go. Push the scales down as they're separating from the liners. So that's the negative. One other positive that, again, is a little bit surprising for a knife that would have been offered at the price point that this was, look at the blade centering there. They are perfectly dead center. That's something that you don't even see in some more expensive knives. I mean, in all honesty, it's not something that's essential for a blade to be perfectly centered, but that's something that it's quite nice. So overall, you've got blades that'll take a quite keen edge. They'll hold it for a fair amount of time, easy to sharpen, carbon steel. You have a knife that was affordable at a fairly low price point. You have decent fit and finish, but with flaws of the scale material, which is unsurprising considering the quality of the scale material. And as I said, produced between 1956 and 1988. It's not really worth anything in the collector's market because there was a lot of them produced, but it means a lot to me having come from my grandfather, who, as I said, is something of a personal hero of mine.
Henry, would you mind talking about what a low price point versus a high price point would be for a knife like this, and about the blades themselves?
Sure. I don't have a specific price that this would have been offered at new, but based on other Imperial prices that I saw in their old catalogs, we're looking at somewhere between $1 and $8 maybe, brand new. There was so many of these produced, and there's a lot of them that are in quite bad quality that you can get on the secondary market, so sometimes you'll be able to get these as low as $5 or $6. in fairly okay condition. I'm talking not blades broken off or anything like that. But you're not really gonna ever have to pay more than maybe $15 or so for one of these, unless you've got either one that's in absolutely pristine condition, was owned by somebody famous, or was produced a very long time ago. Like I said, this one was just 56 to 88, so it's a pretty new as far as Imperial knives go. Knife. Yep, what did you want me to discuss in regards to the blades specifically?
I guess you've told me about shapes of blades
Sure.
and also how sharp they are and whether or not they need to be sharpened often.
Sure, so this is what they call a clip point blade. And the reason being is because, as you can see, you have a flat back here, and then the back is, well, clipped to come to a point right there. This gives you a very acute point. It's very good for, well, I don't want to say stabbing things, but we'll say using the point. There's not a whole lot of belly. There's a little bit here. Belly is the curve to the edge of the blade. But as I said, carbon steel is pretty, at least these old carbon steels, fairly easy to sharpen. They take a very keen edge, and they hold it for a reasonable amount of time. So this is your standard clip point blade. It's a very, very common blade pattern. The other blade, the secondary blade on this, is a pen blade, which is just a very small utility blade. It was called a pen blade originally because this type of blade was used for taking bird feathers and turning them into old quills. So you would use just a very small blade like this to sharpen the bird feather into a quill, and then you'd be able to write with it as a ink pen, therefore a pen blade. So we don't do that anymore with these blades, but they are still a very useful little blade for cleaning under your fingernails, opening mail, whatever. Anything that you would need a very small little blade for, pen blade is a good option for it. And this knife is in fairly good condition, but the main thing about it is just who owned it before, and the fact that he gave it to me. It's really quite special. So that's a review of this Imperial Barlow, gifted to me by my grandfather, and the introduction to our channel, Practical Knife Review. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, hopefully you learned something, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.